it's interesting that the article starts off and talks about the firearm buying for the past couple of years being due to the pandemic, and never mentions some pretty significant other reasons why people went out and legally purchased a firearm. The article 538 does not mention any sort of rioting, any sort of looting, any sort of defund the police, where Americans across the country were concerned for their safety and went out and legally went through the background check process. 20 million, 21 million in 2020, and so far 16.7 this year with a month to go. So law-abiding Americans were concerned for their safety across the country. And like you said, in these cities, you don't have to look much further than, just in the last couple of weeks, Los Angeles, where the district attorney talked about, he was proud of the record there, letting criminals off easy, including one convicted murderer who, after spending 6 years in prison of a 50-year sentence, is out. And the LAPD released a press release telling people to cooperate and comply with follow home robberies. These are law-abiding Americans going out to purchase firearms, including in states like California, including in New York City, where you had massive riots and violence over the last 18 months. And you had a mayor and a governor bickering at each other and throwing blame. So if Americans aren't going to see leadership and safety from their elected officials, including in the cities you mentioned across the country, they're going to go out and they're going to buy a firearm. And 21 million last year, 16.7 this year, went through the legal process, passed the background check, and went home with a firearm. And I'll add, education, training, permitting courses across the country have been jam-packed over the last 18 months. So these are people that are interested in safe firearm ownership. They know about the responsibility that comes with it, and they are interested in practicing it.
And the 538 piece also didn't touch on, when they were talking about firearms traced, they were cautioned at a couple of different points. I thought it was interesting by researchers. But then they didn't actually say, okay, were these repeat offenders? Are these criminals? Did they purchase their firearms legally even? I mean, that's kind of important data if you're trying to make the argument that all of these law-abiding people out there buying guns are now turning around and shooting towns up.
Yeah, and you made an interesting counterpoint to right away when they were writing about how thousands and thousands of firearms were immediately turned around and used right away, time to crime. And then they mentioned two examples where we know in the vast long-term data trends from, they were citing ATF data and FBI data, and the long-term trends of the FBI's data says the average is about 9 years. So if you're going to talk about what is different over the last 2 years, like they would like to frame this argument, you can't just say it's coronavirus, and you can't just say it's law-abiding Americans buying firearms legally.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. Last question for you, Matt. We appreciate your time today. The people who are purchasing firearms, everyone always likes to, and I find this interesting as well, because it has changed so much in the past 20 years. And it's even actually changed a lot in the past couple of years, because you got a lot of suburban folks out there going, okay, we don't like what we're seeing on the news. We don't like all the stuff about defund the police. And, they see crime rates rising in their cities because of some of these other policies. But tell us, who's actually, in the past 2 years, we've seen record number of sales. Who's actually making these purchases?
Well, it's a great point. The firearm owning community across the country has changed dramatically. And leading the way, I believe in 2020, African Americans purchased firearms at a 58% higher rate than they did in 2019. Hispanic Americans have gone out and purchased firearms over that same time span, 40% higher. Asian Americans, I believe, was about 42% higher. So the community is changing a lot. I believe the National African American Gun Association had record membership over the last summer, including 1,000 members a day for a stretch across the country. So you're seeing, you can easily Google articles about new firearm ownership. It's all over the country. And these are people talking about taking their safety, the safety of their families, into their own hands, because they see what is happening in the lack of leadership and will to keep them safe from a lot of these elected officials in states that have very strict gun control. They're still going out to buy them legally in record numbers. And if nothing changes, they're going to continue to do so.